There are almost endless ways to build rail systems in Factorio. Different layouts, philosophies, different solutions for different planets. And that is one of the reasons I enjoy trains in this game so much. But we will make it more practical. This railway array. I've left the blueprint in the description of the video because I know how this usually goes. You reach the point where you need trains, and you spend hours trying to design stations. So if you want a ready-to-use solution that simply works, feel free to use this one. It contains everything needed, and it is not over-engineered. Iron, copper, coal, stone, oil, train refueling, power distribution, even a dedicated taxi station for your personal train. There are also balanced outputs and buffer chests, and enough free space to expand naturally later. You can simply place it, build only the lanes you currently need, and let it work. Sometimes I use different designs depending on the run, but this particular setup has survived multiple playthroughs already. At this point, it became my I just want trains working solution. Now, back to loaders. This unloading system uses exactly the same principles we discussed earlier, and the result is something I genuinely enjoy looking at. Clean, fast, reliable, perfectly buffered. And I'm showing it at this scale for a reason, because there are 3 important structural advantages here that are much easier to notice this way. First, buffer chest placement. The buffer chests themselves are nothing special. Every experienced player uses buffers. But loaders allow us to position them differently, much differently. And because of that, look at the unloading area now. Compact, readable, having clear structure. Personally, I value this kind of visual clarity a lot, especially in large factories. Second, these 2 chest groups separated by mechanical balancers. This is the thing that looks awkward with inserters, but here it works beautifully. And the practical effect is bigger than it might look. Imagine a situation where your factory is consuming resources rapidly, but currently no train is unloading. In a traditional station, specific chests empty first, specific belts starve first, even while some chests remain full. But here, because all chests balance mechanically, every output line pulls evenly from the entire buffer, which keeps throughput stable. And stable throughput is one of the most important things for large-scale logistics. And now, the third benefit, probably the most important one. Equally even wagon unloading. Not visually, practically. In many unloading stations, one wagon empties faster than others, which means the train keeps sitting there, waiting for the slowest wagon, occupying the station, blocking traffic, reducing throughput. But here, all wagons unload evenly, which means trains leave faster. Stations clear faster, traffic flows smoother. And the larger your rail network becomes, the more important this gets. This single detail alone dramatically improves performance. Lines stay saturated. The entire system requires far fewer manual adjustments later. From an engineering perspective, this is deeply satisfying to use. And another thing I really like, upgrading it later is trivial. When the time comes, you can simply apply an upgrade planner across the belts and loaders, and the whole station scales up automatically. Like this. No rebuilding, no redesign, no chaos. And this exact setup can comfortably support your base, from early trains all the way to endgame, or until you decide to build a mega base. And yes, without loaders, a station like this would look completely different. Over the years, I've built many inserter-based unloaders. Some compact, some extremely fast, some extremely cursed. And after all that, I learned to truly appreciate this next level of logistics. For me, this feels like real technological progression. And now, one small detail to make it work. I'm pretty sure I already sold you on the performance side of this setup. At this point, you can probably see why I like it so much. It can be built right at the start of the rail era, without constantly redesigning everything every 2 hours. And more importantly, it can survive almost the entire playthrough with minimal changes. But there is another side to this. The part people usually realize slightly too late, because this setup is not just a train station blueprint. It changes how your entire factory develops. And here's this important detail. This single blueprint requires 140 loaders. Yes, 140. And I can already imagine some of your reactions right now, because suddenly this stops being, oh nice, I'll just paste it, and becomes, dear God. Yes, this is the point where the logistics itself becomes part of the engineering challenge. And if you want to build this comfortably, you need a plan. And here is the approach I strongly recommend. First, prepare for it early. Set up yellow loader production as soon as your factory stabilizes. Let them accumulate in the background while your factory grows. Future you will be very grateful when you need all 140 of them. Second, make sure your iron production can actually support this. Not instead of science, not instead of ammunition, not instead of factory expansion. In parallel with all of it. Because loaders consume resources, like a hungry megabase engineer who discovered beacon spam. And third, build in stages. Because manually placing all these balancers without construction bots is a form of psychological warfare, at least for me. So sometimes I build the core structure first and upgrade into the fully balanced version later. Now, a small message to the people who still insist that loaders are somehow overpowered. Take a look at this. Then tell me, with a straight face, that managing a production chain for 140 loaders feels like cheating. And if you truly want the full engineering experience, you can enable the lubricant loader variant in the AAI settings here. And now, before unloading a single wagon of stone, you first need to route lubricant pipes through your rail infrastructure. Because, apparently, someone looked at this logistics and thought, you know what this needs? More pipes! And remember, you don't even unlock lubricant until oil processing. So, if you actually build a fully lubricant-fed rail array in survival, please send me a screenshot with the total playtime. I'm genuinely curious. Now, a small strategic spoiler for the rest about the space age expansion. I strongly recommend avoiding lubricant loaders there and keep this expensive but lubricant-free option if you plan to take loaders design off-planet. The dry variant is already expensive enough, and once you start building off-planet, you quickly realize how painful lubricant logistics become inside space infrastructure. Loaders are extremely useful there. But lubricant routing inside space platforms becomes exhausting surprisingly fast. Back to scaling. You may notice that the fuel belt also scales here. Yes, it is not needed actually. A minor detail, but worth mentioning. As well as these two speakers here. The first one alarms if the fuel is low. And this one, next to it, it's temporary and not included in the blueprint. If we check its global alert, it just asks for a standard video like to keep the channel running smoothly. Think of it as an automated reminder to support the channel if you find this useful. Deleting that now, and back to important things. This entire blueprint uses only yellow belts and yellow loaders. This is done intentionally, because even the yellow version provides serious throughput, because early red infrastructure is expensive, because this gives you flexibility. If you will afford it, with the initial yellow version, you get 2 full red belts of stone and coal, 4 red belts of iron ore, and 6 red belts of copper ore. Or the opposite, if your factory demands heavy steel production, for example. Realistically, that alone is already enough to comfortably leave Navis and begin expansion. And with a proper management, it can support an entire playthrough. And another nice thing is, I'll remind you, upgrading later is trivial. You do not redesign the station, you don't rebuild the layout, you simply apply an upgrade planner. There is only one rule to remember here. The balancer section and everything before it should always be equally fast or faster than the output side. That single rule keeps the entire array fully compressed under maximum load. Also, one more obvious point. You can make cheaper intermediate upgrades by mixing loader tiers. For example, 2 yellow loaders instead of 1 red, or 2 red loaders instead of 1 turbo, like this. You scale naturally, not through replacement, through evolution, which is another reason I enjoy this so much. And later, when your factory matures, and you become a wealthy Factorio industrial overlord, you can transform everything into turbo infrastructure. Exactly like I do. The results are beautiful. However, such an upgrade leads to one important point. A point about your engineering goals. As foundries enter the picture, everything changes. I'll break down foundries properly later, for those who have not reached that stage yet. But in short, if configured correctly, foundries effectively double your plate output, even without productivity modules, which means one red belt of iron ore becomes 2 red belts of plates, or one fully saturated turbo belt of plates. And this is where something interesting happens. After Vulcanus, this old red belt infrastructure suddenly remains completely relevant, because your smelting efficiency left the same, or even doubled if you upgraded to foundries. But what happens if you still decide to upgrade this entire rail system to full turbo? You will see that this exact same footprint suddenly supports roughly 4 times the output. 4 times. Using infrastructure you originally placed near the beginning of the playthrough. And what does that actually mean? Well, every foundry setup here consumes 1 red belt of ore. So we take our outputs and split them, like this. Now we have 16 red belts of ore available. 16! And naturally, we feed them into 16 foundry blocks, 1 input each. And what comes out? 16 turbo belts of plates. Not ore, plates. Let me spread them out a bit, just to make it easier to see. There. Now the scale becomes obvious. What started as 16 red belts of ore has become 32 red belts of plates, using exactly the same rail infrastructure. Let's add the calcite. Foundries are hungry creatures after all, like this. And let's see if everything keeps up. There we go. Now as it all goes, I'll rewind a little, right here. Now everything is flowing. Every line is saturated, every foundry working. What a satisfying sight. And a useful little note here. If you see a setup like this and immediately start worrying about calcite, in practice, not as much as you might expect. For a smelting complex of this size, the calcite demand is surprisingly reasonable. Certainly not the thing that would stop me from scaling. And that's the important part, because if your goal is growth, real growth, without rebuilding half the factory every few hours, this rail design makes that possible. The infrastructure you built earlier doesn't become obsolete, it evolves. The stations stay, the layout stays, the investment stays. You simply use better technology and your entire base grows with it. For me, this is exactly the kind of engineering progression I love in Factorio. Not replacing systems, improving them. Of course, manufacturing 140 turbo loaders is absolutely not cheap. But at that stage, we are talking about the late game. And this is the scalability I wanted to demonstrate. In other words, this blueprint can exist at different scales. You can simplify it heavily, or push it far enough to support quite a large industrial empire. Both approaches work. That choice is entirely yours. And with that, our ground logistics is complete. We solved assemblers, improved the bus, optimized the rail stations, and hopefully, you saw a few new ideas here. I'll give you a moment to process all of this, because now it is time to leave the atmosphere and move into orbit, where space platforms introduce an entirely different challenge: extreme space constraints. Loaders become surprisingly useful there, not as some magical universal solution, but as a very powerful tool for building compact systems inside extremely limited footprints. So click on my next video on your screen right now, and let's see what kind of engineering disasters we can create in space.